The boardroom fell silent except for Richard Blackwell's cruel laughter echoing off the mahogany walls. He had just finished mimicking my voice in front of 12 senior executives, his tone dripping with exaggerated femininity and contempt. "Maybe we need someone with a more authoritative presence to handle our biggest clients," he said, still smirking as every pair of eyes in the room avoided mine. That was the moment I realized that my 15 years of dedication, my record-breaking sales numbers, and my Harvard MBA meant nothing to him. I was just the gay guy with the wrong voice. But as I sat there, feeling smaller than ever, I was already planning how to take away every single one of his most valuable clients. Being a gay man in corporate America means mastering the art of calculated invisibility. To modulate your voice in meetings, to avoid certain gestures, to laugh at jokes that cut pieces of your soul away. For 15 years, I had perfected this dance, climbing from junior analyst to senior vice president of client relations at Meridian Financial Group. I thought success would be my shield, that numbers and performance would speak louder than prejudice. I was wrong. No matter how many millions I brought in, how many impossible deals I closed, or how many late nights I sacrificed for the company, there was always that moment when the mask would slip from someone's face, revealing the ugly truth underneath. They tolerated me. They even celebrated me when the cameras were rolling, but they never truly accepted me. And in the ruthless world of high-stakes finance, tolerance isn't enough. It's a weakness waiting to be exploited. They thought they were putting me in my place. But you don't survive 15 years in finance without learning that the most devastating attacks come from the inside. Quietly, methodically, and with a smile. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong in spaces where your talent speaks louder than their prejudice, hit that subscribe button. This is where we tell the stories they don't want you to hear, where being different isn't a weakness, it's your greatest strength. My name is Alexander Chen, and at 38, I had everything I thought I wanted. A corner office on the 42nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, a penthouse in Tribeca, and a client portfolio worth over $2 billion. Meridian Financial Group wasn't just any investment firm. It was the kind of place where fortunes were made and destroyed before lunch, where handshake deals moved more money than most countries' GDP. But success in this world came with a price that few people understood. Every morning, I would stand in front of my bathroom mirror practicing. Not presentations or pitches, but the careful calibration of my voice, the deliberate straightening of my posture, the conscious effort to occupy space the way they expected a man to occupy it. I had learned early that authenticity was a luxury I couldn't afford. The microaggressions were constant but subtle. During client dinners, colleagues would introduce their wives while I sat alone. My partner David deliberately uninvited from company events. In meetings, my ideas would be ignored until repeated by a straight colleague, suddenly becoming brilliant innovations. There were the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room, the way certain clients would specifically request someone else to handle their accounts without explanation. My assistant, Jennifer Martinez, a sharp woman in her 50s who had been with the company longer than anyone, often served as my early warning system. She would subtly let me know when certain executives were asking questions about my personal life, when clients made comments about my presentation style, or when I was being excluded from informal meetings where real decisions were made. Jennifer understood the game better than most, having navigated her own battles as a Latina woman in finance. The worst part wasn't the overt discrimination, it was the constant self-doubt it created. When I lost a client, was it because of market conditions, or because they were uncomfortable with who I was? When I wasn't invited to the annual hunting trip where major partnerships were discussed, was it really about my lack of interest in killing animals, or something deeper? This uncertainty was exhausting, a mental tax that my straight colleagues never had to pay. Richard Blackwell had been CEO for 3 years, brought in from Goldman Sachs with promises of modernization and growth. He was everything the board wanted in a leader: tall, commanding presence, perfectly styled silver hair, and the kind of confident arrogance that clients mistook for competence. From the beginning, there was something about me that bothered him. It wasn't just professional rivalry, it was personal, visceral. The signs were there from our first interaction. During my initial presentation to him about the Yamamoto Electronics account, a $120 million deal I had been cultivating for months, he interrupted me mid-sentence to comment on my theatrical presentation style. When I tried to continue, he suggested that perhaps someone with a stronger executive presence should take point on such an important client. I managed to keep the account that time, but the message was clear. Over the months that followed, Blackwell's hostility became more sophisticated. He would schedule important strategy meetings during times when he knew I was with clients, then make decisions about my accounts in my absence. He reassigned my highest-performing team members to other departments, claiming it was for their professional development. Most damaging of all, he began planting seeds of doubt about my capabilities with our biggest clients, suggesting in casual conversations that perhaps they might prefer working with someone who better represented the firm's traditional values. The breaking point came during the quarterly review meeting that Tuesday morning in November. All the senior VPs were present, along with several board members who had dialed in remotely. I had just finished presenting our Q3 numbers, which showed my department had exceeded targets by 37%, bringing in over $400 million in new business. The room should have been celebrating, but instead, there was an uncomfortable tension I couldn't quite identify. That's when Blackwell stood up, that predatory smile spreading across his face like he was about to deliver a punchline he had been rehearsing. He began talking about the importance of executive presence in client relations, about how our industry required leaders who could command respect in any room. Then he did it. He began speaking in an exaggerated, effeminate tone, clearly mocking my voice, my mannerisms, everything that made me identifiably different from the rest of them. The humiliation in that boardroom was unlike anything I had ever experienced. As Blackwell continued his performance, complete with exaggerated hand gestures and a falsetto that bore no resemblance to my actual voice, I watched the faces around. The table, some looked uncomfortable, a few even looked away, but none of them said anything. Not one person in that room had the courage to stop what was happening. But in that moment of absolute degradation, something crystallized in my mind. For years, I had been playing their game, trying to fit into their mold, accepting that I would always be the outsider looking in. Suddenly, I realized I had been approaching this all wrong. I wasn't the one who needed to change. They were. The opportunity I had been waiting for, without knowing it, came in the form of the Morrison Industries deal. Morrison was a tech conglomerate worth over $50 billion, looking to restructure their investment portfolio and pension funds. Kind of client that could define a career, the white whale that every firm in the city was chasing. More importantly, their CEO, Patricia Morrison, was known for her progressive values and her company's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Blackwell, predictably, saw this as his chance to finally get rid of me. During a private meeting in his office the day after the boardroom incident, he made his intentions clear. Airing assigning the Morrison account to Bradley Cooper, a mediocre performer whose main qualifications were his Yale pedigree and his membership in the same country club as Blackwell. The message was unmistakable. I could play along with their games or find myself increasingly marginalized until I had no choice but to leave. What Blackwell didn't know was that I had been building relationships with Morrison Industries for over 2 years. Not through the official channels, but through the network of LGBTQ+ professionals that existed parallel to the traditional corporate structure. Patricia Morrison's daughter, Sarah, was openly lesbian and served on the board of several LGBTQ+ advocacy organizations where I had been quietly volunteering. More importantly, Morrison Industries' chief financial officer, Michael Rodriguez, was someone I had mentored early in his career when he was struggling with his own identity in the corporate world. The beauty of Blackwell's bigotry was that it blinded him to the connections and relationships that truly mattered. While he was focused on golf club memberships and Ivy League networks, I had been building something far more valuable: trust, authenticity, and mutual respect with people who understood what it meant to be different in a world that demanded conformity. As Blackwell began his campaign to undermine me with our existing clients, I started implementing my own strategy. It began with subtle conversations, casual check-ins with the clients I had built relationships with over the years. I didn't say anything explicit about my situation at Meridian, but I began floating the idea that I might be considering new opportunities, perhaps even starting my own boutique firm. The response was immediate and surprising. Client after client expressed concern about losing me as their primary contact. They hadn't been working with Meridian Financial Group. They had been working with Alexander Chen. Trusted my judgment, my analysis, my ability to understand their unique needs in a way that the cookie-cutter approach of larger firms never could. Marcus Thompson from Velocity Automotive was the first to make it explicit. During what was supposed to be a routine portfolio review, he leaned back in his chair and asked directly if the rumors he was hearing about my departure were true. When I explained that nothing was decided yet, he made his position clear. Wherever I went, Velocity's $200 million account would follow. Similar conversations began happening with increasing frequency. Alina Vasquez from Pacific Energy Solutions, whose renewable energy investments I had grown from $50 million to $300 million over 4 years, made it clear that her company valued our personal relationship over any institutional loyalty. Jonathan Kim from Nexus Technologies expressed frustration with what he called the corporate bureaucracy at Meridian and his preference for working with someone who understood innovation and disruption. By December, I had quietly secured commitments from clients representing over $500 million in assets under management. But the real prize was still the Morrison deal, and that required a different approach entirely. The Morrison Industries presentation was scheduled for the first week of January. Blackwell had spent months preparing, bringing in external consultants, crafting elaborate marketing materials, and orchestrating what he called a press to win their business. Bradley Cooper had been positioned as the lead relationship manager with a team of junior analysts to support the pitch. What they didn't know was that I had already been having conversations with Morrison Industries for weeks. Not as a representative of Meridian, but as someone considering starting his own firm. The discussions were preliminary, exploratory, the kind of relationship building that happens in the spaces between official business. Michael Rodriguez and I had met for coffee 3 times in December. Conversations that appeared casual but were actually laying the groundwork for something much larger. He shared Morrison Industries' frustration with traditional investment firms, their desire to work with advisors who understood their values and their vision for the future. More than that, he expressed Patricia Morrison's specific interest in supporting diverse-owned businesses and minority entrepreneurs. The morning of Meridian's presentation, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of attending as planned, I called in sick. It was a calculated risk, but I knew that Blackwell would use my absence as further evidence of my unreliability, perhaps even making comments about my commitment to the firm. I was counting on it. The presentation, according to Jennifer, who had sources throughout the building, was a disaster. Not because of the financial projections or investment strategies, but because of the tone. Blackwell, in his arrogance, had made several comments about Morrison Industries' progressive agenda that could be accommodated without compromising. Sound business principles, Bradley Cooper had fumbled basic questions about ESG investing and sustainable fund management. Most damaging of all, when Patricia Morrison asked about the diversity of their team. Blackwell had made a joke about how they were working on that while looking meaningfully at the room full of white men. 3 days later, I received a call from Michael Rodriguez. Morrison Industries was declining Meridian's proposal, but they were interested in discussing their options with alternative investment advisors. Would I be available for a meeting? The meeting took place at Morrison Industries headquarters in Midtown, a gleaming tower that embodied their commitment to innovation and sustainability. Patricia Morrison was exactly what I had expected: sharp, direct, and clearly someone who had built her empire by making bold decisions and surrounding herself with people who shared her vision. The conversation lasted 3 hours. We talked about investment philosophy, about the responsibility that came with managing pension funds for thousands of employees, about the opportunity to use capital as a force for positive change. More than that, we talked about authenticity, about the value of working with advisors who understood what it meant to challenge conventional thinking. By the end of the meeting, I had a verbal commitment for Morrison Industries to move their entire portfolio to my new firm, contingent on my ability to formally establish the business and meet their regulatory requirements. The account was worth $580 million. But Blackwell wasn't done with me yet. When word reached him that I had met with Morrison Industries, he called an emergency meeting with HR and legal. The accusation was clear. I had used proprietary information and client relationships developed at Meridian to pursue my own interests. It was a breach of my employment contract and grounds for immediate termination and potential legal action. The meeting in Blackwell's office was his final performance, his last chance to destroy me completely. Cut! He sat behind his massive desk like a judge pronouncing sentence, with the head of HR and the chief legal counsel flanking him like executioners. He spoke about loyalty, about integrity, about the consequences of betraying the firm that had invested so much in my career. What he didn't know was that I had been recording everything on my phone, something I had started doing after the boardroom incident in November. Every inappropriate comment, every discriminatory joke, every instance of him creating a hostile work environment for me because of my sexual orientation. By the time he finished his speech about my supposed ethical violations, I had enough. Evidence to destroy not just his career, but potentially expose Meridian to millions of dollars in discrimination lawsuits. I resigned from Meridian Financial Group on a Thursday morning in February, effective immediately. The letter was brief, professional, and gave no indication of what was about to happen. Blackwell probably thought he had one, that he had successfully pushed out the problem that had been bothering him for so long. Within 2 weeks, Chen Capital Management was officially established as a boutique investment advisory firm specializing in sustainable and socially responsible investing. Coming at the regulatory approvals, which normally took months, were expedited through connections I had built in the LGBTQ+ professional community, including 2 commissioners at the SEC who understood the importance of supporting diverse-owned businesses. The exodus from Meridian began immediately. Morrison Industries was first, transferring their entire $5-100-80-million-dollar portfolio on the same day my firm received its final licensing approval. Patricia Morrison made the announcement personally, citing their commitment to working with investment advisors who shared their values and understood their vision for the future. But Morrison was just the beginning. Marcus Thompson moved Velocity Automotive's $200 million account within a month, followed by Elena Vasquez and Pacific Energy Solutions. Jonathan Kim brought Nexus Technologies, along with 3 other tech companies he had referred to my services over the years. By summer, Chen Capital Management was managing over $1.2 billion in assets, with a client list that read like a who's who of progressive, forward-thinking companies. The impact on Meridian was devastating. Losing over $1 billion in assets under management triggered a massive restructuring. 3 senior VPs were terminated, including Bradley Cooper, who had somehow managed to lose 2 additional major clients during his brief tenure as the Morrison relationship manager. The firm's stock price fell 12% in the quarter. Following my departure, and industry publications began speculating about deeper problems in their client retention strategy. For Blackwell, the consequences were more personal. The recordings I had made, combined with testimony from other LGBTQ+ employees who had experienced similar treatment, became the foundation for a discrimination complaint filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. While I never sought monetary damages, the investigation revealed a pattern of discriminatory behavior that the board could no longer ignore. Blackwell's resignation was announced 6 months after my departure. Couched in corporate language about pursuing new opportunities and strategic differences with the board. But everyone in the industry knew what had really happened. In a sector where reputation and relationships were everything, he had become toxic. A liability that no major firm could afford to associate with. The most satisfying moment came during the annual Financial Services Diversity Summit, an event I had attended for years as a representative of Meridian, always feeling like an outsider despite my title and success. This time, I was there as the founder and CEO of my own firm, being honored for my contributions to LGBTQ+ advancement in the financial sector. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience that included many of my former colleagues from Meridian, I thought about that moment in the boardroom when Blackwell had tried to humiliate me. He had wanted to make me smaller to remind me that I would never truly belong in their world. Instead, he had shown me that I didn't want to belong in their world. I wanted to create my own. The speech I gave that night wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about the power of authenticity, about the business case for diversity, about the incredible talent and innovation that gets unleashed when people can bring their whole selves to work. But mostly, it was about resilience, about the quiet strength that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it. Today, Chen Capital Management employs 43 people and manages over $3 billion in assets. Our offices occupy 2 floors of a building in Soho, with floor 2 ceiling windows that flood the space with natural light. The walls are covered with certifications for our ESG investment strategies and awards for our workplace culture. But what I'm most proud of are the photos from our company events, images of a team that looks like America, where difference isn't just tolerated, it's celebrated. I still think about that day in Blackwell's boardroom sometimes, but not with anger anymore. That moment of cruelty became the catalyst for everything that followed. His prejudice forced me to stop trying to fit into someone else's vision of success and start creating my own. In trying to diminish me, he accidentally set me free. The gay kid who was told he was too soft for the business world now runs a firm that proves authenticity and empathy aren't weaknesses in finance, they're competitive advantages. Every client who chooses to work with us is making a statement that they value substance over stereotype, performance over prejudice. There are still moments when I catch myself falling into old habits, modulating my voice or checking my mannerisms. But they're becoming rarer. In my own space, surrounded by people who respect me for who I am, I'm learning to just be myself. Turns out, that was all I ever needed to be. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you had to hide parts of yourself to succeed, I want you to know that your authenticity is not a liability, it's your superpower. Subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments about a time when you turned discrimination into determination. Together, we're rewriting the rules about who gets to succeed and how. They get to do it. Your voice matters, your story matters, and the world needs what only you can bring to it.